Hello, everybody, and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. How is everyone doing this evening? Happy and blessed Monday, and welcome to episode 547 of the Welcome to Asgard podcast on this, the day of the feast of Saint Gabriel, the Archangel, where tonight we're going to be talking about the aftermath of this past weekend's box office because, oh boy, just when you thought things were bad for the new live-action adaptation of Snow White, with an abysmal opening weekend, not only domestically, but most especially globally, guess what? The numbers have come in, and yes, just as expected, they have been adjusted down. So whereas initially the thought was the movie opened to $87 million plus in the global market, it has now been rounded down to 85 million. So not a whole lot of movement there, but still 87 to 85 is definitely not a good place to be. So this film is absolutely on the path to being one of the biggest box office flops in a while, but also of being one of the biggest box office flops, if not the biggest, of 2025. It does have a lot of competition, however, from another Disney film from this year, and that, of course, is Captain America: Brave New World, which itself continues to struggle at the box office. It did indeed reach a milestone of $400 million over this past weekend, as I had expected that it might. Over the past few weeks, it seemed to be trending in that direction. But as we all know, the movie has to make a crap ton more to get anywhere close to breaking even if you take into account that joke of a box office budget or of a production budget that has been peddled by the mainstream shill media, all of those different trades, the same trades that are continuing to, still also run with the $270 million production budget of Snow White, which also in and of itself could easily be lowballing the actual total for the movie. So let's just say it's a very bad summer, very bad year so far, rather, for Disney. And though they do have some prospects on the horizon this year, they of course have the next film they likely will have any success with, in my opinion, will be the live action Lilo and Stitch. I think that's one where you don't want to sleep on it, kind of similar to Moana 2, where I mentioned with that one, hey, don't sleep on this. Moana is a huge property. Well, Lilo and Stitch is also a pretty big property. That Stitch doll does sell quite well, even so many years after the original. It looks like they are doing a very faithful adaptation of the source material, and that's going to make a lot of people very happy. It seems like it is more of a positive, uplifting type movie versus that of a Snow White, which any way you look at it is just trying to bring people down. And so that is going to be our focal point on the stream tonight. And of course, your comments and your questions throughout the night as well as we go through these box office numbers. But before going any further, please make sure that you smash that like button, that you also smash the rumble button as well. Light up the fire button over on Odyssey. I'm trying to get things going over on X/Twitter. So I should be live over there. The problem is that for some reason the chat just does not want to work with the program that I use. I've done everything that I can, and for some reason it just keeps saying the X broadcast is not live. So whatever in the world that means, it's really hard to say at this point. So anyway, with all that being said, let's dive into the chats before talking about our various subjects. And if I seem distracted, apologies. My son is struggling a bit to get to bed. He had he had to learn things the hard way this past weekend. In other words, he learned the lesson of, hey, don't touch very hot things. He unfortunately was helping me make something, and it was near a hot oven, and he decided, oh, let me go ahead and see what this thing inside the oven feels like. And he has some burns now on his fingers, and that's been problematic, especially since one of the burns, and the biggest one, in fact, was on the thumb that he sucks, right? He's a 4-year-old, and so that was I think the toughest of all, and he's having some issues with that tonight. And so hopefully, he'll be okay. But if I am distracted, that is the reason why. So yeah, let's go ahead and say hello, though, to our people. We got 6:46 p.m. The man with the orange hat saying, I see ya. I see you, man with the orange hat. If you had any comments earlier than that, I was not able to get the chat up until a certain time. Snorterpoopus Cuber, hello, humans and other quitters. What's going on, Snorterpoopeth? How's it going? Snorterpoopus tagging to say, hello to you. Thank you for being a member here on the channel for as long as you have. We've also got another member, Raichu. What's going on, Raichu? What's up, everybody? What is going on, Raichu? Welcome back to the chat. Carl Jacobs hanging out. What's going on? We got Icthulu. What's going on, brother? He is a member as well, saying, Odin in chat, happy Monday, and wish you all well tonight. Well, I appreciate that, Icthulu. Very much so. Jeremy Zakowski, good evening, Odin, everyone. Good evening to you. We got Jimmy A., who is a longtime member here. Hail, chat, and Odin, hail to you. Lee Mitchell in the chat, waiting for some shots. We love shots here on OMB Reviews. We got Forever Sci-Fi saying, hail all, hail to you. The man with the orange hat, behave. My axe is sharp and swift and suffers no spammer or troll, exception only to the pet troll, begrudgingly. Yes, indeed, I understand. The Geek Daddy saying, evening all, good evening to you. Justin C. tagging hail to you and the chat, ready to see a real mathematician at work with the box office bomb that is Snow White. Well, when you just put it that way, it does obviously beg the question and beg this video clip.
Time to see a real mathematician at work!
Because it is indeed time to have a real mathematician at work. You can go to a lot of different places for your box office coverage, but this is one of the few places where you'll get it to you straight, and we will, of course, analyze the numbers fully in all the ways that we can. A little bit of an early one there, but since you said it, Justin C., it has been made to be so. We got Bruce waving in the chat. What's going on? Gary Banjo Sandwich Worthington. What's going on? The man with the Gary Banjo Sandwich saying, hello from a sleepy Brit. Always sleepy over there, it seems, especially with how late it is. Caveat Ties. Hey, hey, what's going on? Caveat Ties. Welcome back. Always glad to see you in the chat. Thanatos Felicitas saying, hello, Odin. Hello to you. Icthulu 547. Have you been doing this for over 10 years, Odin? Actually, I have not. I have not. 547 episodes, if you think about it, if there's 365 days a year, you know, do some math there. It could easily be done in less time than that. Really, it comes down to I used to do these shows a lot more rapidly. I used to have a few nights a week that I would be doing the show. And then at one point, I got into a very comfortable rhythm of doing it twice a week. So I used to do it on Tuesday and Saturday evenings. And of course, once the children came into the picture, once the kids became a part of the discussion, I had to pull back on that. Chose one night, was on Tuesday nights for the longest time, and then we switched over to Monday. We've been in the Monday slot now for maybe about a year or so, almost. Kind of crazy to think about. And that was because Tuesday got very, very crowded, especially with a lot of more, let's just say, larger channels in our community who decided to push their times up further and further and further until eventually they were just, you know, walking all over the time slot that I had been in for years. But hey, it's all good here. I'm a small fish in a very, large pond, as one could say. But we're happy here. We're happy, and I just love this chat. This chat's amazing. It can be, you know, obviously there's times in which it's been a bigger chat. There's times in which it's even been a smaller chat. It's always an amazing chat, and for those that are here every single week, I really do appreciate y'all being here and trusting the stuff that we talk about here. Let's see. Carl Jacobs saying, this will be a day long remembered. It has seen the end of Snow White. It will soon see the end of the woke rebellion. One could hope, as long as the activists are in charge of the higher-ups, though, that's not going to happen anytime soon. I mean, we could talk about just how much money has been lost by Disney. Remember, they lost over $1 billion back in 2023. But they also had other revenue streams where they were able to make a decent amount of money past that point. You then talk about last year alone, where they had $3 billion films, right? So made some pretty good profits on those movies. And ultimately, there are enough things going on well for Disney for them to somehow be able to convince their shareholders not to hold them accountable. And it really will take... and I don't know what power, as someone who has some stock, but am by no means someone who's like, oh, yeah, I'm a stockholder. I understand the stock market. I'm not one of that knowledge, but I cannot fathom how one can have part ownership of a company, essentially, right, of a public company, and not have a larger voice. I don't understand how is it that there are so many stockholders, especially for a company like Disney, that have to know there's things that are going wrong here, that have to know that their stock value has plummeted so much over the last few years especially, and that the numbers themselves could easily be better, and how they could not for a moment, it seems on a massive scale, say, hey, yeah, you are violating the fiduciary responsibility and obligations that you have to said shareholders. I really do hope and pray that that's going to be where the victory is ultimately won. That's the only way anything is ever going to be able to change. And also a big shout out to all of the new subs here on the channel. We've seen a huge increase in subs ever since the Snow White video went live yesterday, and especially after last night's stream on Valiant Renegade's channel. So thank you, Valiant Renegade, for letting me jump on even just for a little bit at the very end. It was a ton of fun. All right, the man with the orange hat saying, behave. My apps is sharp and swift. I got that one already. For some reason, the chat is not doing things the way I had hoped it would, and it's making it very hard. It's making it more difficult to see what chats have actually been read. So, first world problems on my part, I suppose. All right, let's see. Jimmy A. Disney is going to have so many bombs this year. I'm investing in an underground shelter. It's pretty bad. And again, there is some positivity on the horizon for Disney, so we cannot rule out, Disney, for the rest of the year in every single one of its releases. One of the other factors that we may have forgotten about is the fact that Avatar: Fire and Ash is coming out December 19th of this year. So I think Lilo and Stitch is a movie that has a lot of potential. I think $1 billion is on the table for that movie. So they'll have to go through the financial losses of Captain America, of Snow White. You'll probably see some financial losses for Thunderbolts. So that is, every now and then there are a couple of movies that I, try to project a bit on and say, hey, wild card, you never know what could happen, right? It is the movies, it is the box office, and sometimes surprises can happen. I would not be personally surprised if Thunderbolts maybe did better than expected, if it's good. It's a huge if. The trailers have not really been selling it all that well, but if they are able to produce something that is entertaining and might be able to actually drive out some of those normie audiences, it could be okay. It could end up being okay. But that's a huge if. There's still a lot of time left for us to get some projections on that. It's a little too far out at this point to get any firm projections. I don't think it's going to be a huge hit, though. Just make sure you mark my words. I'm saying I think it might do a lot better than expected. It kind of like a surprise hit, though I think the budget is going to keep it from making any actual money in any way. So, yeah, you have that factor going on. Then you have the summertime movies, which there's really not a lot of Disney summertime films that are coming to mind, at least. I'm sure y'all will be able to mention some in the chat. And it really isn't until, in my opinion, December of this year that you have a guaranteed hit. Because despite my hatred of Avatar, and I cannot stand either one of the films, and it bothers me that those films make billions of dollars every time they get out, the fact is that it's going to make a lot of money. So will it be able to make enough net profits, though, to make up for the hundreds of millions? I mean, we're talking about between these two movies alone, just looking at Snow White, just looking at that end, looking at Captain America: Brave New World, you're talking about roughly 500 plus million in losses. So $500 million worth of losses just from those two movies alone. We're not even looking at any of the other smaller Disney movies, anything from their subsidiaries, or any other potential flops along the way. Now, it's going to get some help, right? Disney is going to definitely get some help from Lilo and Stitch. So that's going to be able to mitigate some of those losses a little bit. But will Avatar really be able to make as much as is needed to make up for whatever the negative is at that point? Because, again, you'll probably see some losses from Thunderbolts. You'll probably see some losses from Fantastic Four. Again, Fantastic Four is one that could maybe do well. For some reason, my gut says Thunderbolts has a better chance, but we're still too far out. We'll have to wait and see. All right, Cthulhu, spare the rod, spoil the child. Of course. King Ramsky, that's the stuff. He enjoys that always. Kimberly G, howdy Odin and all the chat. Hail to you. Thanks for being here. Jimmy A, have you seen the teaser for One Battle After Another? It doesn't show much, but it looks interesting. I have not. Fox 1, welcome back. Glad to have you here. We got Vestige V4 7199. Hail to you, Vestige. Forever Sci-Fi, they won't be taking a live question from their shareholders anytime soon, though. That is true. But that is the question is not about the live calls, right? It's more of a, do shareholders actually have any recourse? I suppose you would have to file a lawsuit. And to be honest, I'm surprised if that is an avenue. Again, I don't know the legalese of that, but I'm surprised that there has not been a major push, especially more recently, for there to be some type of class action lawsuit against the company for, basically abandoning fiduciary responsibilities. Because even if you are just, not just about talking about these box office flops, but even more so the fact that they're not being upfront, they're not being honest about their numbers, they're not being straightforward. They're letting trades like Variety and Deadline run with this made-up budget of $180 million for Brave New World when anyone with a brain knows it costs a heck of a lot of more than that. I don't know. I feel like there has to be some action or something that they can do. I just don't know. I'm not as experienced in that space. Akuris, what's going on? Hail Odin, hail to you. Orange at Disney will have success with Lilo and Stitch and Avatar 3, which will only embolden them, as it usually does. Duncan Blackthorn, hail Odin, I'm lurking, but here. Glad to have that. Glad to hear that, I should say. Michael Brigette, Fantastic Four could be a hit this summer. It could be, but if you made me bet right now, and again, we're still way too early, so this will probably change, but based off of the trailers that I've seen for both and the general sentiment around both IPs, I would not be surprised if Thunderbolts ends up being a much more entertaining film than anyone could have thought. That leads to a positive word of mouth, similar to what you saw with Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and that it's able then to leg out to a better overall release. I'm not saying that even if that does happen, necessarily that means it's going to be a hit, or that it's going to make its money back, or that it's going to be a massive moneymaker. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm rather trying to point out is I think what you'll probably end up seeing is the movie go past the various projections for it and in many ways outperform other films in a similar time slot, other films of a similar genre, even within the MCU. That's kind of where I'm going with that. I don't think it's going to be a huge hit by any means. But if any one of those films, if any of the MCU films had a chance of breaking through in any way, I would more likely put money on Thunderbolts than on Fantastic Four. I don't think Fantastic Four is going to have enough. Geek True 64 says here, I agree with you. Lilo and Stitch and Avatar will do well. I think Thunderbolts could be a slow burn if it gets good word of mouth. Not sure if their successes will outweigh the losses. Agreed, Geek Truth. Absolutely. And again, Avatar is going to be that big question mark for me as far as how much money does it make. The second one did not make nearly as much as the first one. I mean, don't get me wrong, it still made a lot of money, but there was clearly a loss in audience between the first and the second movie. I would not be surprised if there is another massive loss in audience between the second and the third film. That's just my own perspective. Obviously, I hope and pray and wish that it ultimately fails, but I'm also a realist, and I know that that's just not going to happen. It's going to be one of the biggest films of the year. Thomas Payton, welcome, says Hollywood is dead. Forever Sci-Fi. He's a member saying, if Disney expected Fantastic Four to be a long-term success, they would have hired younger actors for Sue and Reed. That's also a very fair point. All right, caught up in the chat now, so let's just go ahead and dive into the main topic for the evening, which, of course, is looking at the box office battle between Captain America, Brave New World, and Snow White. Because which film is going to be the biggest box office loser of the year? Now, we've already shown this video earlier, but it is important to always know that whenever you come to this channel, you can always expect one thing.
Time to see a real mathematician at work!
That's right, everybody. You can always expect a real mathematician at work and some math. So let's go ahead and dive into it. So first off, I'm going to shill for myself here for a moment and look at the article that I wrote this weekend. Box office breakdown. Snow White opens to global box office catastrophe. That's right. This is my article for geeksandgamers.com. And let's just go into some of the commentary here. After many months of terrible PR, and stars Rachel Zegler, and an overwhelmingly negative critical response to the filmmaker's choice to bring in CGI nightmare-fueled dwarves into the mix, the official numbers for Snow White are finally out, and they are even worse than what many of us were expecting. while the trades were projecting 40 to 55 million domestically in its opening, which was updated to over 45 million. After the Friday numbers came in, the international markets are where the real story comes into frame. Even with the initial domestic estimates, the so-called box office shill media experts have been predicting tracking of the movie would likely make over $100 million globally by the end of its opening weekend. Though they mostly predicted the domestic numbers well, the international releases vastly underperformed. And as it says here, keep in mind that most movies on average make about 30% of the entire box office. Again, it also made $87 million and now has been adjusted down to, that's right, $85 million. Let's go ahead and pull this number up here. Right, so Disney's Snow White officially now $85 million opening weekend. Abysmal. But remembering that 30% of the box office is typically made, right, by a movie in its opening global weekend compared to the rest of its run. Meaning, if you take a final box office of $300, $400 million, you look at your opening weekend, usually that opening weekend accounts for about 30% on average. That's with an average run. If that happens with this box office, that means that the movie will only make $261 million at the global box office. So average run based off of at the time, based off of an $87 million opening, now 85, again, bring that down a few $1 million there. We're talking about a movie that if it has the average box office run of most movies, it's going to be probably around $250 to $260 million. Now, a huge win for them is the fact that is higher than what you saw from the likes of the Marvels. It's still very, very bad because it's a far cry from even the box office, I would even argue the tepid box office of The Little Mermaid live action, which, yes, it made 500 plus-ish million or so. However, because of its massive budget, really didn't make much as far as profits are concerned, and is also, especially in comparison to more larger successes like Disney's Aladdin live action remake of making over $1 billion, is clearly not in the same ballpark. It is in the same ballpark as another Disney live action, which is Dumbo. Dumbo, of course, being one of the very few, before the modern times, one of the very few Disney live action adaptations that actually just straight up flopped. Made only 2.1 times its budget. You need to make at least 2.5 in most movies today, though, around 3 times your budget in today's market. It goes on to say, things get worse when you remember that Snow White cost at least $270 million to make. Assuming that the movie didn't cost more, which it likely did, this would mean that it currently sits at about $363 million in the red. Though it will likely make more over time and has a decent chance to leg out over the course of its run, this means that Snow White is currently tracking to easily lose at least $200 million when all is said and done. There's still a chance for walk-up traffic, and with mom-daughter demographics to show up to push it further than the average movie with an opening like this, but that remains to be seen. So basically, a lot of people have been bringing up the Mufasa numbers or the Mufasa push. Mufasa had a worse opening weekend, right? If you actually pull up some comparisons here, let's actually put Mufasa into the mix because it is one that some people have brought up. So if you put up Disney's live action, right, it opened to $42 million. That's been adjusted down from the $43 million initially estimated. When you compare this, and all these other numbers, by the way, from years ago are all adjusted because it's the only fair way to compare, against the box office flop, verifiable flop of Dumbo, it came in well underneath. $42 to $56 million. Little Mermaid, not even close. 42 to Little Mermaid's $98 million. The Marvels even, another film people are also comparing it to, it couldn't even beat that. 42 domestic to the Marvels 47. The big difference is that the Marvels International was so bad, I think Disney Snow White is still going to end up making a bit more than the global total of the Marvels. And again, it's going to be because of those internationals, not because of the domestic. But pulling this up against Mufasa from earlier this year, that's right, Mufasa, or rather the carryover from last year, Mufasa only opened to $35 million, but has since legged out to $253 million, which is a very difficult feat to be able to accomplish. So again, kudos to them for pushing that film out there. But the fact that that movie made $35 million its opening and Disney Snow White made $42, and yet, when you compare the total globals between them, $85 million to the $125 million that was made by Disney's Mufasa in its global opening weekend, you can see why I have some doubts about the prospects of that happening. But anyway, that's the comparison between Mufasa and and Disney Snow White. But here's the other main point I try to make there, okay? The movie currently stands at a solid heinous score, right? 46 votes on critic list, that's Snow White, of only 11%. As some shows will likely bring up what happened to Mufasa the Lion King, which also had a terrible opening and went on to make over $700 million, you can remind them of the vast differences in how both films were received by general audiences, and even Mufasa, that even Mufasa opened to 125 million globally, which would mean if the 30% separation between the two, again, 85-ish million opening weekend versus 125, that means it's trailing 30% behind. If that 30% trailing continues globally, that would mean Snow White could only ever get to $490 million. So we have two different numbers right here, right? We have all right, does it have an average box office run? In which case, if that happens, based off of this opening, based off of that, $260 million is what you can expect the film to end its box office run at. Whereas, hey, if you're going to compare it to Mufasa the Lion King, could you potentially see that same type of legging out? Okay, let's say you see exactly the same kind of legging out. Even if you did, because there's a 30% separation, though, between those two movies, and both of them, by the way, have released in all of their major markets at this point, that means that, what's 30% behind the $700 million that has been made thus far by Mufasa? That's only $490 million. So we're talking about right now, and again, this can change by next week, and you all know 2 weeks into your release is when you get the most accurate data. It's the best opportunity that we have to predict what a final box office will be, also what potential box office losses will be. But as of right now, we're talking about an average run. If it has an average run, then it would get to around $260 million. If it has a spectacular run, because, hey, even though $700 million from Mufasa is not really a whole lot in comparison to its budget, and is nothing compared to the billions made by the first of the Lion King live actions, quote unquote live actions, I should say. Even with that being the case, when it comes to Snow White, $490 million as your high end of a $270 million budget is not going to make it work. Is not going to be in the same ballpark. As it says, with a budget of at least $270 million before marketing and the cuts from theaters and studios, the break-even ranges from $675 to $810 million. If the budget ends up being $300 million or more, and there's very good reason for us to think the budget actually is higher than that 270, then the break-even will be roughly $1 billion, and therefore, no matter how you spin it, this is awful news for Disney. So this has been, I think, the key defense that a lot of these people have been bringing up is, hey, well, Mufasa legged out. Mufasa did really well. Okay, bring that up saying, all right, Mufasa did really well down the line. Let's just run with that. Let's say that Little Mermaid, sorry, I keep getting these mixed up. Let's say Snow White has a very similar run. Right? Are you arguing that you think it would do at least Mufasa or slightly behind? I can't imagine you would say it would do better, seeing that the scores for both films from audiences are night and day. Right? Mufasa didn't get the highest of grades, but it got a lot higher grades than what Snow White has gotten thus far. Not to mention, of course, a lot of the backlash surrounding the main star and other factors. But let's just, for the sake of argument, say that it'll be slightly less impressive than the run that was had by The Lion King, right? That was had by Mufasa. Okay, you're still talking then about a cap of $490. So a range of $270 to $490 off of a $270 million budget, meaning you still are a good $200-300 million in the hole. Ooh, that's bad. And if it ends up actually being closer to $1 billion break-even point because your budget's actually $300+ million, Valiant Renegade last night said he wouldn't be surprised if it's around $320 after tax credits and all those other things. Yeah, guess what? 3 times that, $900+ million. Yeah, you're talking about a movie probably that needs to make in that range just to have a chance of breaking even. That's not going to happen. So yeah, do not be surprised if this movie eventually gets announced for a very quick release on Disney+. They basically had to do everything they can to try to put out this alarm, this massive fire that is burning right now in their company, because this is burning a giant hole in their pocketbook. You never want to have a movie, even if you're a giant company like Disney, you never want to have projects that cost you hundreds of millions of dollars. You add this to Captain America: Brave New World, and you have an entirely newly invigorated discussion of the losses that Disney will have. So that is the Snow White side of the argument. So we're talking about projected potential losses in that range, right? As of right now, we are looking at the, let's see right here. Right now, we're looking at the film, and this is, again, assuming a $270 million production budget. These are also using numbers from Box Office Mojo, so they are not the most up-to-date. But that would put currently Snow White at negative $363 million versus Brave New World, which, based off of a projected $300 million budget, I think that's still a pretty fair estimate, is at $262 million. So could you see Snow White make more money globally than Captain America: Brave New World? You could. Based off of these current numbers, though, I don't think I see that happening. I really don't. $180 million was the global opening of Brave New World. That means that it has a $100 million advantage up against Snow White. Even though Snow White and the kids' movies tend to leg out a lot better than a lot of Marvel fare, I don't see it catching it. I really don't. So the big question that's going to help us determine which movie is going to be the biggest loser is going to be, okay, how much did this movie actually cost? What was the actual budget for this movie? So we'll dive back further into that to do some more analysis in comparing them, looking at the budget, saying, okay, worst case scenario for both movies, best case scenario for both movies, what kind of losses can we expect? As I drink some water. All right, Cthulhu, who is a member, saying, there were times it was bigger, times it was smaller. But one thing is always true. General Winkster, the lovable troll, shall always be patrolling under the bridge. This is true. But we love him anyway. We love him anyway. Jimmy A. tried to say, is it possible for Avatar 3 to make under $3 billion? That is a good question. Let me go ahead and look up real quick some of the data there, because I'm a data-driven guy, and I have a lot of numbers in my head. I don't have everything. I do not have everything. I also love how Tony at Deadline continues to try to shill for Disney, and it honestly should make anyone kind of sick to their stomach for that very reason. So, yes, I absolutely do think it'll make under... Actually, yeah, it's guaranteed to make under $3 billion. That's an easy one. Because I was like, wait a minute, I forgot for a moment. So, unadjusted, the first Avatar film made $2.9 billion, and the second film from back in 2022, so not too much of adjustments needed there, made $2.3 billion. Now, the thing that some people, I think, maybe forgot, and I think I'm pretty confident that I was able to point this out back at the time, of how really the second movie was not doing nearly as well as the first one in many different ways. Let me go ahead and pull that up, since someone did ask about it, because we're talking about box office and we're talking about, successes and laws of diminishing returns, that kind of thing. It is important to put things into perspective. Okay. All right. Yeah. Let's just point this out. Okay. Cause this is big. All right. So yeah, now I'm starting to remember these things, of just how bad, things actually, I think you could argue how bad things are for the Avatar franchise as far as law of diminishing returns. There's no denying the movies have made tons of money globally, and that's a lot of profit still, even though the cost up front is also massive. Okay, so whereas the first Avatar film, these are all adjusted for inflation, by the way, so try to keep things fair. Whereas the first film actually opened to $116 million domestically, and the second film made more with $144 million, the first movie somehow legged out to be over $1 billion domestically. Again, these are adjusted, but still insane that in today's dollars, over $1 billion was made just at the domestic for Avatar in 2009, right? Versus the second movie, which only made $734 million at the domestic box office. So that is a massive decrease between its domestic totals, right? From 2009 to 2022. That's a lot of people domestically that did not go to see this movie, okay? That's huge. Okay, it's even worse, though, when you look at the international. So 3.2 billion. Again, we're still talking about massive numbers here. I'm not going to say that Avatar is a failure or a flop, okay? This is still big money. But the law of the diminishing returns is one that you still have to pay attention to and cannot ignore, okay? And the fact is that as time has gone on, though people still appreciate the spectacle of Avatar, many more people today are critical of Avatar as an overall film with the story than there were when the film first came out, right? I've been harping against the movie since it came out. I'm always happy to see every year there are more and more people who are like, yeah, I just don't get it. Thank you. But Avatar, again, a beautiful spectacle to look at for sure. Not worth the time, not worth the money to spend on that crazy IMAX 3D stuff that he likes to, obsess himself over. So anyway, domestically, it's already pretty bad. $1.1 billion 2009 value to 734. All right, that's a massive decrease there. It's worse, though, internationally. So whereas internationally, and again, take these numbers with a grain of salt, it made estimated with adjusting for inflation $3.2 billion worth. And again, people always say, oh, but what about the exchange rates and all these other things? Well, here's the issue. When the numbers are being reported in US dollars, all you then need to focus on is the inflationary rate of the dollar itself. So, I mean, yeah, if you want to get super technical with it all and say, but what about that week versus that week when the exchange rate was different by a few cents? Okay, sure, absolutely, you could find differences between them. In general, though, it's not going to be enough to make that much of a difference. Still, $3.2 billion adjusted for inflation is what the first Avatar film did, whereas Avatar Way of Water only made $1.7 billion. Again, I say only, but keep in mind, I'm still saying these are massive. These are massive movies. But look at the audience here. Total for Avatar 1, adjusted for inflation, $4.4 billion. Versus Avatar 2, $2.4 billion. So that's still a lot of money. But you know what else is a lot of money? $2 billion lost between the two films. The second film made $2 billion less than the previous one. Again, when you were actually looking at numbers as they are. Now, let's just unadjust it for a moment because, again, some people don't like that. Some people don't like that at all. But, again, when you compare it this way, you still see a pretty massive discrepancy between them, right? 785 versus 684, 1.1 billion versus 720, with the totals 2.9, so roughly $3 billion versus 2.3. So you're still seeing a massive decrease between them. But roughly, again, $2 billion of value was lost between those two movies. What I think might happen, when it comes to that movie, Fire and Ash, don't be surprised if the box office comes in underneath again. And if it has a similar drop, Avatar Way of Water, though it was liked by a lot of people, especially those James Cameron fanatics, it was also not universally praised. It received a lot of criticism, just like the first one did. Do not be surprised if the third film also cuts its audience in half. And if that happens, then that means the third film may not make over $2 billion. And again, that still means it's going to make $1 billion. It's absolutely going to happen. But if this kind of cut, and that's why after the third film, I will be able to maybe start to make some projections on the rest of the series. But if it continues to go in this direction, where it's cutting its audience in half roughly every single time, eventually that means you're going to get to a point where you're making under $1 billion for these movies, which cost the last one $429 million production budget. At least that was reported. That doesn't even cover the marketing cost. So anyway, a little bonus Avatar talk here, but very much connected with what we were just talking about with some of these others here. All right. Let's see. Hardwick at 803 said, in 2006, Disney commissioned a photo of Rachel Weisz as Snow White to promote Disneyland. I always wish they had made an actual movie. Instead, they waited 19 years too long to cast the wrong Rachel. It's a good point. It's a very good point. Geek True 64. I differ from you in that I like Avatar. I know it's the greatest flaw you have. I will always throw people your way, dude. Geek True 64 has a great channel, excellent coverage of physical media. Seriously, he is awesome. He has helped me find some films and some versions of movies that I had not previously known and have bought them based off of his recommendations. However, his greatest flaw and the worst take that he has is absolutely his defense of Avatar. Anyway, much love to Geek Tree 64. So it says, but realistically, the third one will not do as well. It is too close to the second film. It will do well, but less than the first two for sure. But again, people forget the second film made a lot less than the first one. When you are, again, looking at ticket sales, whether it's ticket sales or whether it's inflation, $2 billion difference between them. Lost $2 billion between the first and second Avatar film when you're comparing like-for-like dollar values. That's pretty crazy. Okay, again, Ramsey is saying, double math? Is it my birthday? I don't know. Is it? Zendo Deb over on Green Machine saying Avatar doesn't profit Disney as much as an MCU or live action remake or animation. Not necessarily true. I think the whole thing you're going after is because of the split revenues. The issue is that when you are making that much profit, it still ends up being a lot. It's like, for instance, when people talk about the Barbie profits, people said, whoa, that was a huge win for Warner Brothers. It was a big win for them, but they had to split that money with, was it Hasbro? Or is it Mattel? I forget. I think it's Hasbro. So they had to go like 50-50 on the profits, though, on that movie. And so that film ended up making, I think, over $600 million in net profits. So that's still a cool $300 million of profits, though. You add on top of that, or you rather bring up a film like Avatar, where you're talking about, maybe close to $1 billion worth of net profits. That's a pretty payday, either way. And that's a lot higher than some of their other animated films, even. Especially more recently, if we're talking about more recent releases. Maybe in a former time, you would have a point, but not with the current state of things. Disney Star Wars isn't canon. Agreed. Hardwick, I still think Thunderbolts is going to flop. It's full of characters a few people care about, and the trailers are filled with annoying Red Guardian moments. There's nothing there to attract viewers. I can remember a lot of similar things being said about Guardians of the Galaxy. The difference, of course, being at least Guardians had some catchy music and some entertaining trailers. So, yeah, that's going to be definitely against Thunderbolts doing well. But about a ragtag group of characters that nobody knows, as long as it works. That's the huge if. That's the huge caveat. There's no guarantee that it's going to work. There's no guarantee that they're going to play it right. And based on their track record, it doesn't seem likely. There's just, again, this is nothing to do with analytical data here. This is purely speculative on my part, based on a feeling, based off of an emotion. And I just have a feeling that if any film were going to rise above the projections, that's probably a better way of putting it. What do I think is going to do better than projections might indicate? I would put Thunderbolts, if it's good, if it's able to deliver. And that's a huge if and not very likely. All right, let us see. Orange Hat, the man with the orange hat, says here, Deadline is now blaming Snow White's failure on political division, blaming red counties and states. Well, of course they are. That's Tony at Deadline. That's what Tony does. Tony will always shill. No. I'm sorry. If you are so caught up in your own egotistical liberal bubble, left-leaning bubble, whatever you want to call it, if you are so caught up in your industry bubble, probably the most accurate term for it, that you honestly believe that politics is why a film is failing, you haven't been paying attention. You remember a film called Barbie? That movie sucked. That movie was a terrible film with terrible messaging and overt fourth wave, fifth wave, radical feminism throughout its messaging. And yet, even with that, guess what? A lot of conservative women went to go see the movie. Even though people like me were like, that movie sucks, don't go see it. When it comes to the female demographic especially, there usually is not. Usually, that means it's not the rule. It's just, again, what usually happens. Usually women are not going to care as much about that stuff, or is not going to notice it as much. It's going to kind of go over their heads in many ways and in many regards, right? So it just ticks me off when people like that at Deadline and other places are trying to make that excuse when it just does not actually work when put up to scrutiny. Geek64 saying, I was saying pretty early on that Snow White wouldn't do well because it isn't from the Renaissance era. Normies don't have that 90s connection to the original movie like the other adaptations. Again, I do think I would push back a little bit here, and I'll have to look up some more data here. Let's see. Some of y'all might know where I'm going with this, if I could even spell. See, Jungle Book 2016 live action. So yeah, I think this is a great example of kind of doing away with that mindset. So the Jungle Book, right? This is also a very old property, right? It says here it's from the 1967 film. So this is not that golden era in any way. People forget that film made $966 million at the global box office. And so therefore, in today's terms, it made over $1 billion. So that film was a huge win for them. And there is one other film, and this is the one that I wasn't as sure of, because this one I would argue is a bit more obscure because it's from the 1970s, and I grew up loving it, but it is what it is. And this might be the one place where, again, whereas I think Jungle Book kind of proves something in my direction, Pete's Dragon, I think, definitely argues one in your direction for the point that you made, right? Because that film, which the trailers looked okay, the trailers looked fine, that is from a 1977 film adaptation. That film only made $143 million at the global box office. But I will point out, that budget actually, according to this, only $65 million budget. That's insane. I can't believe they ever spent that much money on a live action adaptation. That's pretty crazy. That's pretty crazy. And let me see what they did there for their release. Just double checking, because it did get a cinematic release. And then, of course, you have Alice in Wonderland, and I know that film did gangbusters. Let's see, Maleficent, which was a variation of that, 753. So yeah, I don't think it's a rule that those movies on paper don't do well. So no, I would definitely reject your hypothesis there. I do think that the film not doing well is not because of when the original film came out. Had they gotten an actual actress who embodied Snow White, that film could have made $1 billion easily. Anyway, Michael Brigette, I know your projection videos come out on Friday before the numbers has their projections for the weekends, but I'm curious what you think of their general projections compared to other sites. So I don't really look at the numbers for their projections. They typically cover more so things like theater counts for the weekend. So the few places that I use for projections are Box Office Pro, Box Office Theory, and then Box Office Report. Box Office Report always releases theirs Thursday night, so they're not usually available until Friday morning. That's why I usually wait to do my box office preview videos until they've released to see if there's any major discrepancies. Between my Box Office Pro and Theory, though, I tend to go more with Theory. That's Sean Robbins' site. He used to work for Box Office Pro. He was a big part of the methodology they used in their projections. It's not always spot on. There's always problems that can arise. He was one of the very few, though, who had predicted a couple of films from the last few years correctly. I think it was the Barbie one especially, where the projections were a certain level, but his projections were like 60, 70 million higher, and he turned out to be absolutely correct. So yeah, that's where I would go in that regard. Let me get this super chat because it's been waiting for about 6 minutes. So Raichu at 825, thank you very much for the $2 super chat. Saying, any thoughts on the upcoming Minecraft movie? I don't want it. I don't care for it. I've played Minecraft before in my life. I've seen a lot of Minecraft videos. I've watched more Minecraft than I have played it. I'm not much of a gamer. And so they could do a lot of really cool things with a Minecraft movie. They have clearly not done that for this movie. As soon as they announced Jack Black as Steve, as the generic main character, I already knew from that moment, oh yeah, this is trash. This is not going to do well. So as of right now, the only indication of what it's going to do is Box Office Theory does have some early box office tracking for the movie. So let me see if I can pull that up. doing things live here. Always do things live here on OMB Reviews. We like to helps keep me honest, as I like to say. So this is a site I recommend, Box Office Theory. It's gotten a lot more advanced as the months have gone on. So it's got their forecast. And so it had said between 37. So this gives you an idea also about why I trust his numbers. So he said low end 37.7, high end of 47, and his pinpoint was 42. Well, guess what? He was pretty much on the money with that one as far as opening weekends are concerned. So yeah, definitely doing well. He also gives a lot of other good info here. So for instance, this weekend's top 10 are tracking 30% below the same weekend from last year. 98.4 million, led by the $45 million global opening debut of Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. And it's 51% below the same weekend in 2019. 139.3 million, led by the 71.1 million opening of Jordan Peele's Us. So clearly the box office is nowhere near being healthy enough at this point. But not only does he do the box office weekend breakdowns, he also does more long-term forecasts. He does what he calls this 5-week forecasting, which I love. It gives early indications. It's how we also saw early on the initial projections for Snow White were like $60-70 million worth. I think I almost saw an 80 at one point for the domestic opening weekend. And then with the final analysis, it dropped all the way down to 37 to 47. And I was like, man, that is just phenomenal there. All right, so we do have some projections. So as you can see, the last time he updated his chart, it was when he had Snow White still in the discussion. So 37.5 million. And again, it ended up being about $42 million there. But the movie that was asked about was Minecraft. So right now, the early tracking for Minecraft is a domestic opening of somewhere between 55 and 68. So yes, Minecraft could end up having a higher domestic than Snow White. That would be interesting. So that is $61 million for your total domestic box office. And then it also goes into what it thinks the total domestic will be. And so it's saying low-end total domestic for Minecraft, 139, high-end, 222, average then of 186. The only number that has been reported for budget so far is $150 million. However, the source is MoviePhone, which is not very much in the space these days as far as reliability. So I would suspect the film probably costs between $150 and $200 million. If it's making $186 million domestically off a $150 million budget, that's not the best. That's not exactly where you would want to be. You would need to have a pretty sizable advantage internationally. And I don't know exactly how big Minecraft is internationally. I assume it's big. I assume that it does well pretty much everywhere. The problem, I think kids just will not care. I think any kid and teenagers especially are going to look at the trailers for this movie and say, oh man, this looks awful. It's going to be like, the equivalency is they're going to view it, I think, like if their parents tried to make a trailer for what they thought Minecraft was. They saw their kids playing Minecraft. They were like, ooh, this looks like so much fun. Let me try to make a movie to get my kid to leave the house. It has that kind of feel to it, right? Where it's like, man, if someone's parents decided to write a Minecraft movie, that's what we would get with Jack Black being the being the main character, especially. There's so many things that are just so poorly thought out. It's crazy. All right, we got, let's see, Hardwick in the chat. And again, Raichu, thank you very much for that super chat. Appreciate it. Guardians of the Galaxy trailers were very fun. The jokes were funny. Characters were intriguing. The Thunderbolts trailers are just bland and annoying. To you, Hardwick, I do think that there are likely some audience members that do find them entertaining. That just happens, right? There are people that like it, people who don't. I don't remember those trailers specifically being ratioed all that much. So, again, I could be wrong with that. I think the bigger issue is that there is just not a whole lot of conversation around the movie, right? So let me see if I can find a trailer. Let's do Marvel's Thunderbolts Big Game trailer. So that was the one that came out over the Super Bowl. Let's see. I could have sworn I had the return the dislike button. Maybe I didn't. Let me see if I can get that done real quick. Return the YouTube dislike. Add extension. Enhance. Enhance. All right, let's refresh. Oh, yeah. So the bigger issue, I think, and again, this is all just very ancillary, that this is not scientific in any way. I would not put as much confidence in this as I would, my, numbers analysis, okay? But anyway, here's the trailer. So this is the one that came out a month ago. This is the big game trailer. So again, I think this is the one that came out of the Super Bowl. 12 million views in a month. That's not great. That's actually pretty low numbers for a trailer like this, at least from what I can remember. But it's not been ratioed. Look, 233,000 likes to only 12,000 dislikes. That's a pretty good metric there, right? That's a pretty good metric. Let's see if we can find. So again, kind of to give you an idea of how bad that is numbers wise, right? Daredevil from 2 months ago, 17 million views. Brave New World, 24 million views. That's over a 4-month period. We all know that the vast majority of views are usually gotten in the very early runs of things. Let me see if I can maybe find, one more, maybe. Let's see. Thunderbolts trailer. So this is the one from 6 months ago. So I think this was the teaser trailer. Yeah, look at that. The first trailer that came out for the movie. 547 likes to 29,000 dislikes. And this had 19 million views. So the bigger issue is, I think, similar to what we saw with Guardians of the Galaxy. Where in Guardians of the Galaxy, you had a lot of characters that people just did not know. That people just did not have any frame of reference for. But based off of that tells me the normie audience is seemingly okay with this, is seemingly interested in this. So that kind of goes back to the point I was making. I'm not saying the film is going to be successful. I'm not saying that the film is going to make a lot of money or that it's going to break even or anything like that. All I'm saying is do not sleep on it, because I do think that if it is good, huge if there, as Caveat Ty has pointed out, a huge caveat to that, it's got to be good. It's got to get the good word of mouth. It's got to get all the things working for it. Will it, though? It's hard to say. I think it'll do better than expected. That's where I'm confident in right now. I think it's going to do a lot better than anyone could have expected. All right, Guy, I think the only Disney movie that will make money is Thunderbolts. Is Thunderbolts will do decent? I think the only Disney movie that will make money is Thunderbolts. Will do decent. No, it's not going to make money, dude. Again, it's going to be fine. It's not going to make profit. That's the main thing. Lilo and Stitch will make money. Fantastic Four, don't hold your breath. Okay, that's a great sleeper. I've mentioned this one before in the past in some of my more anticipated movies. So yeah, Zootopia 2. Do not sleep on Zootopia 2. I forgot that does come out this year, I believe, right? That to me is the sleeper. That's the Moana 2 more so this year than anything else. Zootopia was very well received, has been watched a lot of times after the fact. So I think Zootopia 2 has a lot of potential to make a lot of money. Avatar 2 will be the biggest by far. It's going to be the biggest film of the year. Avatar 2 just kind of by default. Thunderbolts is not going to be a massive hit, though. It's going to do better than expected, right? That's as far as we can go with it right now. Better than expected, but it's not saying too much. All right, let's see. Where are we in the chats? Jose Taco, what is going on? Geek64 saying, I actually like the Jungle Book live action adaptation, but that was in 2016, almost 10 years ago. Very early on for these adaptations, Dumbo also failed. Yeah, but again, it looks like there's evidence to both sides of that. And that's why, because of that, I don't think it's the timing of when the film came out initially. Because we actually do know why Dumbo failed. Dumbo did not fail because of the fact that it was an older adaptation. It failed because of the fact they got a dark director to come in and make a dark story that scared away a lot of fans. I remember when the movie came out, and I remember all of the conversation about it was, I don't want to bring my kids to that because it looks really dark and scary. Even though it's Dumbo, right? And obviously it does have that, it does have that flair. It does have that Nightmare Before Christmas, I guess you could say, personality to it because of the director behind it. But, when you got the Tim Burton effect going on, it's going to have a darkness to it, in that way. That's why that movie failed, though. It was not because of the fact that it was Dumbo and that Dumbo came out a long time ago. No, it was because of how it was made, all right? So I think that is really... We need to look at it more so with why did that individual film succeed or fail versus, hey, it's because of when the movie itself came out. I don't think there's enough data or evidence to suggest that that's why the films have been successful or not. You could say more successful, but the make or break is not when the initial film came out. Let's see. Hardwick says here, Cinderella 2015 made $542 million off a $90 million budget. Yeah. Why was that brought up? I've always been of the mindset that Cinderella 1 is a great live action adaptation, and yeah, it made money. It absolutely made money. I never denied that. Sahil99, hello to you, Sahil. Welcome back. Forever Sci-Fi, who is a member, saying, used to do a good job making new fans of their older movies using the vault. People bought them for their kids because they had to. Yep. Absolutely. It was also annoying, though, because you're like, oh, it's only available for limited time. And it's like, really? Just let us own it. Arnold, hey, welcome back. Good dude. Welcome back, good sir. Says here, it's ridiculous what Campy is saying, protecting Snow White and saying it made more than 101 Dalmatians and Christopher Robin and not using inflation. Bro, wait a minute. Is Campy really defending Snow White's box office? That is hilarious. Tell me that you are a massive Disney shill who is very likely getting directly paid by Disney without actually telling me that directly. If that is your argumentation, oh my goodness. Do I have a bridge to sell you? My word. Now, he brought up... My gosh, I can't believe he brought up Christopher Robin. Christopher Robin is not even a live-action adaptation. Yes, it's a live-action movie, and it utilizes animated characters, but it's not adapting something per se. It's not like they said, let's make a Winnie the Pooh live-action adaptation, because then it would be all about the Hungry Neighborhood. It'd be all about those characters. No, Christopher Robin's about the story of Christopher Robin, who grew up. So that went back in 2018. So let's go ahead and get some comparisons here, okay? So let's see. Opening weekend for that one was... Hold on. I got that in the wrong chart. Wrong chart here. Wrong chart. All right, let's get Christopher Robin in on this chart. And again, keep in mind, I don't think it should be in this chart because it's a different type of movie altogether. So let's see. By the end of the second weekend, I was like, oh, man, look at that. Oh, man. He found it. I think that, honestly, because Campia, though he's definitely idiotic, I wouldn't say he's a downright idiot, because clearly you don't get to as far in life as he has unless you know how to be able to, convince a crowd to think that you're smart. So anyway, as you can see, Disney Snow White adjusted, again, all these are numbers adjusted for inflation. So $42 million for Disney Snow White, loses to Dumbo, loses The Little Mermaid, and here's the other factor, okay? Disney live actions from the last few years, actual adaptations of the classic stories, those are all films that you can compare it to. I only have the Marvels in here because other people have brought that film up, but I wouldn't even have that generally in the chart here. Mufasa the Lion King, live action adaptation, right? Obviously, you could even argue original film. Christopher Robin, live action movie with animated elements that's not really an adaptation in any way. So yes, adjusted for inflation, you're right. Christopher Robin made $30 million to the $42 million made by Snow White. But Christopher Robin also had some very bad trailers. And it was over time, people were like, oh, this film's actually pretty good. So domestically, it ended up making 123, internationally 122, total worldwide box office of 245. So though I do think Disney Snow White will likely make more than that by the end of its run, It also only cost $93 million to make, which made Christopher Robin a success, I believe, or at the very least close to being a success. Whereas Disney Snow White is not going to come anywhere close to being a success and will be vastly below films like Dumbo, Little Mermaid. And if we're going Disney princess routes, guess what? Snow White versus Little Mermaid? Good luck. If you want me to bring Aladdin into the discussion, it's going to make it even worse for that type of argument. Oh, man. I heard he's retiring from YouTube videos. He's still going to do his podcast, but good riddance. Our shill of the year, everybody. There's a reason why John Campea won finally after 7 years of being nominated every year for shill of the year. He finally won at this year's Raven Awards. It was phenomenal. All right, so Heel99. Hello, can Disney stock over the past 5 years is up 18%. Netflix stock up over 180% over the past 5 years. Tells you everything about where the industry is going. Thanks for the awesome show. Hey, no problem at all, Sahil99. And I think a lot of people really have some doubts about the validity of the value of Disney stock. I think all of these tech stocks have been overvalued, but especially that of Disney. Forever Sci-Fi, we'll have to send Odin the Fat Jack Black action figure. Please don't. Just be a waste of money and postage. I always do say, though, if you send me that kind of stuff, I'll hang it up somewhere for people to see. Arnold, hey, also Campea is saying Snow White can redeem like Mufasa did. It's wild how much a shill he is for Disney. No wonder most of his audience left when we found out how much he shilled for The Last Jedi. Yeah, I mean, I'm surprised it took people that long to realize how much of a shill he was. But yeah, if you see him bring that up, go ahead and link him to my article. Copy and paste what I said there. Right in my article, I literally say, hey, a lot of shills are probably going to bring up Mufasa, but let's just break that down and then talk about why that is a dumb comparison. Jimmy A. Have you heard of the show Adolescence? It seems like they're throwing some political buzzwords around, but the point of the show is true. Heard is very tragic with good acting. Yeah, because of that stuff, I have no interest in it. The fact that there are even people in, the United Kingdom, like some of the most liberal politicians are like, yes, I think all boys should watch this because it teaches about toxic masculinity. Crap. Yeah, no thank you. No interest in it whatsoever. Guy, you think Minecraft could make Mario movie numbers? No. I don't. I do not. The movie, I can say it does not seem like a film that kids are going to be able to enjoy because remember, single-digit age kids will probably enjoy the movie. So it might make something. It might make a few $100 million. But the thing that would have really pushed it over to the edge, that would have, to the moon, is if it was able to appeal to the actual demographic of kids playing the game. But since it's already hard to get these kids off of their computers and out of their digital world to go out into the sky and then sit in a dark theater to watch a movie, it's already hard to do that as it is. Now imagine that you're like, oh yeah, it's a movie about Minecraft. And then they look at that trailer and say, what the hell is this? What the hell is even that? So no chance in hell. Heartbreak Ridge, late to the chat, but hail to you. Oh, Dale, hail to you. Cthulhu, oh no, now I see why you like Sean Robbins. It's the beard, of course. Of course it is. Arnold, hey, I'm still new to your channel, but see you know a lot about box office. Based on experience, when exactly do you have a better idea that Snow White will flop for sure? Second weekend or third or fourth? So with a movie like Snow White, I can know with a very strong sense of surety it's going to flop because its budget is too high and its starting point is too low. Go back even to a film like Mufasa, right? That film had also an abysmal opening. And at that time I said, yeah, based off of an opening of 125 million, it had made 327 million by the end of its run. Based off of that, right, the projections indicated that it would make worst case scenario 468, best case scenario 655. Now that is, again, because this happens, what we call a chart breaker. That means it does better than the average movie. So it is more than doubled its box office since its since its opening weekend, essentially, which is a very hard thing to do. Even though with a $700 million box office right now, looking at, and again, the budget we were told for the film was around, let's see, they said it was a $200 million budgeted movie. There's a very good chance that that is actually not true. As we all know, Disney is notorious for lying about their numbers, okay? So I don't know if the film was shot in the United Kingdom or not. If it was, we'll get some tax returns on that in the coming year, and we'll find out for sure. But if the film costs more than $200 million, guess what? Any profit goes away. But based off of the numbers that they have given us, even with all of those things being taken into account, guess what? The film, oh, good job. It's made $23 million in net profit. $23 million in net profit. That's not going to pay for another film. That's not going to be enough. So, yeah. Anyway, hopefully that helps you there. And but as far as like what the actual best weekend is, I always go by the week 2 metric. Once you know that week 1 to week 2 drop, it gives you an idea of where the film is tracking long term, and then you're able to make much better projections. So whereas most films globally make about a third of their entire box office in their opening weekend, that's an average run. Once you get to week 2, there's a much better range. Most films after week 2 will either double their total box office, again, in the case of Mufasa, it more than doubled it, or those first 2 weeks will account for 70% of their entire box office on average, and it will make very little down the stretch. So week 2 we'll know with much greater surety, but based on the numbers right now and the budget, it's very unlikely it's going to make its money back. Heartbreak Ridge, enhance or back or to the left. All right, we're going to go ahead and start to wrap things up for the evening, everybody, because we're getting close to 9 p.m. I like to try to wrap up by then. Guy saying Avatar 3, it could make more in China than the second one. The second one had to deal with most of the theaters being closed at the time due to COVID rise in China. That one came out in 2022, though, so even if that were the case, I doubt it would be nearly enough to make up for it, because we're still seeing decreases across the board, right? A decrease domestically, a decrease in a lot of internationals, not just in China. So, yeah, you'll never really hear me shill or defend China. Hardwick, Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland was dark, and it made over $1 billion. Yes, but Alice in Wonderland has always been seen as a dark and weird story. I mean, it's about a little girl who sees a very creepy disappearing cat and doing drugs, essentially, okay? You cannot compare that to Dumbo. So, it's not necessarily the darkness of the film. It's that the Alice in Wonderland films, those were geared towards teens. Dumbo was geared towards the little kids and their parents. Parents aren't going to bring those little kids to a dark movie. They're teenagers, different story. So no, there's not an equivalency there, dude. Jimmy A, even Bill Burr and his daughter had to walk out of Dumbo. Yeah. Kenny Remsky, is it just me, or is 2025 looking to be a rough slog for movies? I haven't seen any ones yet. I mean, there are some good ones I think that are on the horizon, or at least ones that I'm excited for. But really, I would say keep an eye out for Film Threat. Film Threat's an amazing channel, you all guys. I'm sure a lot of you follow them already. Chris Gore, Alan Ng, they do great reviews, great coverage, hilarious people as well. And they're the ones who really helped me discover a lot of these independent films. There's independent films that come out, low-budget films come out every single year. And no one talks about it. I mean, one of my favorite movie from last year was a movie I would never have heard of called Strange Darling. My top 3 were all films that were, I think, all endorsed by or supported in some way, recommended in some way by the Film Threat guys. Because the film Dee Dee was also up there. The Bike Riders, also very much an underrated movie too. That one I think I actually knew of beforehand, but Gage 64. It was funny that Disney thought because Tim Burton did an insane Alice in Wonderland, which was successful at the box office, that they would just hand him baby elephant movies. Seems like, again, exactly. Geek Truth, you've captured it exactly. It's like, yes, Tim Burton's style can work with something like Alice in Wonderland because it's weird. You shouldn't have that same type of weird darkness in a Dumbo movie. Come on. Hardwick. I think that Jurassic World Rebirth has a good chance of being the highest grossing July movie. Superman could dethrone it if it's good enough to word of mouth, though. Yeah, right now, I do not have high prospects for Superman. The trailer has not impressed me that much. And I would agree. Out of all of the summer films coming out in a very tight span, you got Jurassic World in the mix. You've got Superman, Fantastic Four as well. Out of those three, Jurassic World has the best chance of making $1 billion. And it's because for some reason, the internationals love it. It's not to the same degree as Avatar, but it has a similar, I guess you could say, Avatar effect, where for some reason, those internationals just gobble that garbage up. I don't get it. Let's see. Tim C. What's going on? Hey, how are you doing? Have you watched Invincible on Prime Video yet? It's one of the best shows on Prime Video. I have not seen it yet. I've heard a lot of good things about it, recommended it to me, but just haven't ever really felt compelled to watch it. I don't know. Just everything I've seen about it just doesn't scream me. Sacre bleu, the deadly poke of Zorro. Hello, Odin. The real reason the Pete's Dragon movie bombed is because it lacked Jim Dale's Doc Terminus. No Jim Dale, no money. Money by the pound. Yeah, maybe. I don't think a lot of people, general audience-wise, would really even know who Jim Dale is. I'm going to be honest there. But take your point. Hardcore fans would probably have been impacted, and they usually make up a pretty sizable portion. Keely Chow coming in late. Hail, Odin. How are you? Thor, Freya, Baby Sif doing? Doing fine. Where you been, brother? Geek64 saying, I do think it's funny that non-Renaissance era adaptations got pawned off to streaming with Pinocchio and Lady the Tramp. I also forgot about Cruella like everyone else. Yep. Hardwick, I've heard that Christopher Robin has some sneaky socialist messaging in it with the solution it proposes to the Suitcase Factory dilemma of the story. It's been a long time since I've seen it. Honestly, do not remember that. I just remember it was a very heartwarming film. Guy, what was a better movie with Snow White live action or live action Dragon Ball movie? Oh, man. I would rather watch the live action Dragon Ball movie because then I could at the very least laugh because of how bad it is. That's a hard one. Master of Gaming, what's up, brother? Will you go see Black Bag? Probably not. Day the Earth Blew Up Looney Tunes movie. I might watch it on streaming. I just don't really care to watch them, especially Black Bag. No interest at all in that. Cthulhu, thank you for the show. Have a good evening. You too, Keely Chow. I watched 2 movies starring Gal Gadot last Sunday and this past Sunday, and they're still better than Snow White. They are Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice, and Wonder Woman. Ugh. The first Wonder Woman is okay. That's the best I will say about it. Some people overpraise and hype that movie too much, but no, Batman v Superman sucked. Arnold, hey, did you see another new Andor Season 2 trailer? Your thoughts? Did you see Season 1? Lastly, we'll review the show if it's worth it, or I feel like you trust your judgment. Yeah, dude, I tried watching the first season, and I got bored to tears. I got 3 episodes in, and I was done. So I've not finished it. I've heard it's the best Star Wars that they've done. I have a lot of friends who swear by it as being a good show, are confident that because of how they're releasing it 3 episodes at a time now, that might actually benefit it. I could care less, though. It's about a character who we already know dies. It's no spoiler there. I mean, it's someone that we already know has no real impact, and why should we care about it? And Diego Luna might be a good actor, but his portrayal in that role is just very uninteresting to me. So no thank you. And then Hardwig, did you see the film threat review of Locked? I did. I've been wanting to see that. So I'm waiting for it to become available. Exemplum is a great independent film, free on Tubi, says Caveat Ties. Arnold, hey, do you think the whole Rachel Zegler hate overcomes Brie Larson? You mean in comparison? No, I think Rachel Zegler has a heck of a lot more heat than Brie Larson does. I'm going to be honest there. Because she went after the source material in a very, very specific way. And she's also, I think, a bit more insufferable. But yeah, definitely a comparison to be made there. And then Hardwick, what do you think is better, Snow White 2025 or Wonder Woman 1984? Oh, no. No. I would have to go with whichever one is shorter. Simple as that. Because they both have things that you could hold on to hold on to your sanity. It's not much, but there are things in there. So whichever one's shorter, that's the better one to me. All right, I do have to head out, gal, though. So thank y'all 50 people still watching. Please make sure, if you have not done so already, please smash that like button. It really does help out a lot. Smash the rumble button as well. Light up the fire button if you're watching over on Odyssey. Huge shout out to Raichu for the lone super chat of the night. Always do appreciate that. It helps to keep the lights on, to keep being able to do the show, to justify to my wife to keep doing the show as well. It's always helpful to be able to come, hey, I got a super chat tonight. But it's all for fun. I love it. So Raichu, thank you very much for that. And let's see. Arnold Hayes said, honestly, what was the main reason that that even the world refuses to support Snow White? Again, I think it has a lot to do with Rachel Zegler. She really poisoned the well there, but also the marketing wasn't all that good. The marketing was not very effective. And I think that when it comes down to it, if you cannot sell your movie off of your star especially and bring people in to think they're seeing it, I think the changes to the story are also a huge part of it too. People want to go see Snow White. They don't want to go see a reimagining of Snow White. So I think that's a big part of it. Anyway, you guys are amazing and beautiful people. We talked about a lot of things tonight. Again, which do I think is going to be the biggest box office loser between the two, to kind of give a point on that question? As of right now, I think it has a very good chance of being Snow White. And the reason why is because I think that in the case of both Snow White and Captain America, both budgets are a lot higher than people expect. I think by the end of it, you'll probably see Captain America's budget be around $350, and I think that you'll see Snow White's around $320. Because I do think that Snow White right now probably won't make as much as what Captain America has made. I think that will be the difference between them. So you might actually have a tie, or a proverbial tie between the two as far as total box office losses are concerned. I'll have a much better idea next weekend, though, once we see those week 2 drop-offs. And no matter what happens, though, it's going to be bad. I hope we find out those true box office budgets, though, because that'll help out answer that question much more easily. Anyway, you guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. A blessed Monday, blessed feast of St. Gabriel, the Archangel. Gonna play the shoutouts video for Patreon members, Subscribe Star members, and of course supporters over on Locals as well, and my YouTube members, of course. Anyway, you guys are awesome, amazing, beautiful people. Have a wonderful rest of your evening, and as always, God bless. Now for a huge special shout out to all of my Chosen of Valhalla members, starting off first with my people on Patreon, Father Luca Illick and Miss Martin Muses. Check out her YouTube channel by the same name, Miss Martin Muses. Also to my Subscribe Star people, Matt317. Check out his Twitch channel by the same name, Matt317. And lastly to my YouTube member, Mr. Roy. Shout out to you, good sir. And if you want your name shouted out at the end of every live stream and video, check out the top link in the video description below where you get access to that. Also, you get access to a plethora of other things. You get your name listed at the end of every live stream and video, like you saw in those names that came up before this video started. And also access to a giveaways channel that I host over on the Discord server where I give away 4Ks, Steelbooks, Blu-rays, all kinds of stuff. So check that out if you're interested in that. Also, I have an exclusive podcast that I hold at least once a month, and it's always a good time, and you get extra bonus content with that also. So if any of that sounds interesting, again, check out that top link in the video description below. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and as always, God bless.